Sure. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all. And it is going to be crazy times. So I think Etienne is a great idea that we just get together and share our humanity and our perspective in the positions of responsibility that we're in. Um, Maybe a couple words about me, and then I'll jump into, I've prepared a few thoughts. My background is that I have degrees in computer science and psychology. I started my first software company when I was a teenager. I worked at Microsoft for 10 years where I served as Bill Gates' technical assistant and the head of Visual C++, among other things. And I've studied under a Zen master. And so mindfulness and psychology combined with a very hardcore technical approach in my way of dealing with both personal and the work life. I'm talking to you today in much the same boat as you all are in, or better or worse in my own personal ways. Worse, probably. My wife has all the symptoms of COVID-19 right now and is in bed with a low fever and a cough and so on. And we're hoping she won't have to go to the hospital. She's got a test, but we don't have the results in. So as I speak to you, part of the back of my mind is, you know, how's my wife doing? How's my wife doing? On the other hand, on the work side, my companies are probably doing better than average in this crisis because FP Complete is largely a DevOps consulting engineering firm. And so the demand for our work, if anything, is going up in this crisis with so much going on online. And Great Scale Ventures, which is a startup investing company that helps people build their startups, is obviously experiencing a slowdown in funding, but is able to help the companies that we've already invested in. So I may be a little bit less stressed out about like work isn't falling apart, but more stressed out because you know, my wife is sick. As we talk today, I wanted to focus on values and core principles, not on tactical things about how to be a CTO and, you know, how to use Slack correctly or something like that. I wanted to talk about how we should handle ourselves and our work lives in a crisis, this crisis. And it seems to me that our job is to provide leadership to everyone that we're working with. People need to know that whatever they're doing at work is part of a long-running set of goals and a timeless set of values. And while we may be adapting, we may even have to do very difficult and unpleasant things like changing our plans or doing a layoff or some other nasty things or crisis response. It's not because the world has fallen apart and we've stopped caring about the things we used to care about. People really need reassurance from seasoned leaders that there is a long-term set of values and there's a long-term plan for what we're trying to do. And so what we're doing is adapting the how, not the what or the why of what we're doing. And I would ask everybody to think about, we're all going to be very emotional in this time. Whether we act emotional, we're probably as CTO sorts of people less emotional on the surface than some kinds of people, but we're just as human as anybody else. And it's going to be tempting to respond to stress by sort of clamping down and locking in on the things that we can control. And I want to encourage everyone not to do that. The people who are looking to you for leadership are most of all looking for the sense that A, someone is at the helm, someone is on the bridge of the ship, and there's somebody paying attention to what's going to happen and to some sort of a long-term plan. And that B, that they can be part of that. People want to know, how can they be part of the solution to the problems that our world and our organization are going to face? So your job as a CTO, more than anything else, and Etienne knows that I say this all the time, what's a CTO's core job? Is to provide a roadmap. People need to know that somebody's thinking farther ahead than they have time to think. You could be a worker bee, you could jump in and help people with their daily work. That's not really what they need. What they really need is someone to say, it's okay. What you're doing is part of the bigger solution, and I'm providing you with a context that lets you see what we're trying to do, how we're trying to get there, and that we are doing something about crises. One thing that I think is going to be sort of a variable that's not the same across everyone in this call is some people are going to be, and already are, at organizations that are going to experience catastrophe, a loss of customers, a loss of funding. Government aid may help, but still, downsizing, loss of momentum on projects we'd like to do, a delay in our timelines, cancellation of projects. But other people are going to be under immense pressure to perform more, more users showing up online, more work being done on online systems, new features being required that weren't required a few weeks ago. And we need to figure out how to perform in a world of stressed out workers, ever-changing information. And I wanted to share a few tricks for myself, things that I use to manage all of this stress. First and foremost is to remember that life is long and the future always comes. However much of a crisis it may feel like we're in, it's really important to remember that all the businesses we're in, all the organizations we're helping with our CTO and similar work are trying to do something valuable for people. And this crisis will pass and these organizations will still be here, and the work that we're trying to do is still going to be important. So what we're doing is managing disruptions on the path to really a steady, meaningful goal that we're all trying to do. Bearing that in mind, I would ask myself, and I would suggest that we all ask ourselves, when this crisis is over, whether it's 6 or 24 months from now, how do we want our conduct to be remembered? What do we want people to say we did? And how did we make their work life? So your responsibility more than anything else is to provide an ethical and honorable sort of leadership that the people in your organization will look to and say, that's how leaders should act in a crisis. And I appreciate that. I think that keeping an eye on the longer term is very helpful right now. In that vein, I would encourage everybody not to consume too much news and information. As the owner of a roadmap, your lower level people who look up to you for leadership and your executive peers who look to you for expertise need to know that you're consuming information and adjusting your short-term plans accordingly. But what they don't need is one more person to echo the information that we're all hearing and create an echo chamber. That sort of the freaking out and repetition and going around in circles is exactly the sign of no leadership that will cause people to panic. The sign of leadership is to say, I understand what's going on. I'm not spending too much time reconsuming the same information. I'm spending a lot of time synthesizing what I know about our plans, what I know about what we have now to deal with and where we want to be. And I'm spending my time over communicating. People want to hear more from you in a time of crisis. And they want to know that they're included in that process. So they'd like to hear you gathering information from them, but they don't want to hear you just echoing things that are already understood. They want to see that there's a way forward. I would argue that keeping your emotions in check, I know Etienne is very good about reminding us to check in on our humanity and not just focus on our logic side. My best tip is don't feed your anxiety monster. The media will feed you information at any speed that you're willing to consume it, but it's not information you can do anything with beyond perhaps an hour a day of consuming the news. So don't do that. The people who are depending on you for leadership don't need you to read the news 5 hours a day. They need you to think about what you can do to help. I would argue, finally, that you shouldn't hide your emotions. People are looking to you to provide an even keel, to provide perspective and direction, but they also want to know that there is a human in charge, that if they have problems, you're not going to not understand them, that if they have ideas, you're not going to ignore them, and that if they're stressed out, you're probably stressed out too. So remember to let people know that you do have feelings, you do have problems that you're dealing with, but at the same time, under-emote. That is to say, don't throw your emotions out at full strength, even though you probably have very strong emotions. People need to know that you're relatively more able to stay calm than they are, just enough to know that there's a steady hand at the wheel and that you're paying attention, that you'll bring your organization forward. I could go on with more detailed thoughts, but that's my perspective. Don't feed the anxiety monster. Keep your emotions real, but calm, and focus on the long term, and help everyone who you work with, whether they're junior or senior, to remember that every action we're taking is part of a short-term response to still achieving our long-term goals and our long-term values, which haven't changed.
But one thing that helped tremendously, and which is the first point you made, which was the roadmap, which is keep your team focused on where we're headed. If you can substantiate that with numbers on what is being built, why is it being built, and sort of re-establishing and keeping people moving forward and looking forward, as opposed to, I mean, there is a time for the crisis management in the now, but have found that as CTO, keeping people focused on the future gains is also critical right now.
Well, Etienne, I think we need to look at what it is to be human. And part of being human is, you know, we're animals, we've evolved to be how we are, and we're not always 100% logical, even when we would like to be. And one of those places, I want to point out two ways in which we want to look for a certain kind of behavior that's going to crop up in ourselves and in those around us, and what we can do to be constructive with it. And one is this one that you're referring to, the sort of overreaction or the desire to react to a sort of intangible threat in the most tangible way. It doesn't help to buy more toilet paper, right? That's just something a person can do, and people instinctively look for an action they can take. Fleeing to the mountains is not the constructive thing to do for your team. Buying more ammunition at the gun shop is not a helpful thing to do when your opponent is the size of a few molecules. But people have a tendency to look for a concrete step. In German, there's the word Aktionismus, which in English would be actionism. And we see it in our government leaders sometimes, and we want to avoid being the idiot who's an actionism buff. Actionism is a tendency to say, I've got to take some action. There's a problem. What can I do to show myself and others that I'm responding? And sometimes that's a foolish thing to do. Sometimes there isn't a specific action you ought to take. Or what you should do is focus on your knitting, so to speak. Keep doing the thing the world has hired you to do, which is building useful services and products for people who need them. Don't always think that there's an action you have to take right now. That's not responsible leadership. And the other thing that we want to look for in our humanness that we want to be better leaders to help people overcome is tribalism. It's very normal for people to want to say, I'm part of a group and we're going to rally together and we're going to fight some other group, and then we'll feel like we're really doing something. This is a situation where our opponent is non-human. We're all on team one. Everyone in the world is on team one if you're human, and the virus is on team two. So this is not the time to start banding together with some people and picking fights with other people. It's a human instinct to do that. So look out for it inside your organization and in other parts of life. Avoid unwise tribalism. We need to understand that we're all part of one fight against an opponent that's non-human.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Ted Harrington. I'm one of the owners of ISC. We're a security consulting company.
My name is Sergey Zubate. I'm currently looking for a new opportunity, just transition from the CTO and COO of Einstein Industries, which is a internet marketing agency.
Russell Bradbury. I'm currently VP of Engineering at Nativo by way of acquisition of my company Simple Reach, where I was CTO. I'm based out of San Diego. And
hi, my name is Deshaun Matthew. I'm here in San Antonio, Texas. I am a fractional CTO.
Hi, everyone. I'm Max Citri. I'm Director of Quality Engineering at GitLab. We're now a remote company from the start, so we are in a good step to face this, but I do love it when Aaron said, be human. We're trying to scale back expectations as well, because people need to take care of their families. Like, they need to go line up and buy milk. They need to go to the groceries. They need to take care of elderly parents. And
I'm currently VP of Engineering at MindTouch in San Diego. We also took drastic measures.
So yeah, my name is Kim Ashen. I'm based in London. The CTO and co-founder of Unibuddy, which is a edtech startup. We're about 4 years old, and we have around 300 colleges and university clients all around the world. Some challenges we're facing right now. So we've currently preparing our operational and financials just to deal with a potential decline in revenues. But we haven't taken any actions in terms of laying off.
Yeah, good. Fritz with CTO with Bizarre Voice. We're in Austin, Texas, and our quick challenges. We serve retails and brands around the world, so obviously that's mixed. Some are doing well, and some are going to be facing some challenges.
Best Moderator Award, because we're back first, right?
What do I get?
did.
That's a lot of being thrown a loop with having an extra person randomly join.
How did the AI decide to put the four of you together? That is profound.
Well, team awesome, you know, can you say?
Having said that, I think as a first breakout group, we just sort of got our feet wet, so to speak. And perhaps in the weeks ahead, we can wade a little deeper into the water to figure out how best we deal with the riptide that's coming at us.
I'll say a couple minutes about our group. I had Mac and Russell and Keith and myself. So Russell, San Diego, Mac, Mountain View, Keith in San Diego, and myself in Austin. Spent a little bit of time just kind of figuring out what we were covering as well. Some overlaps for sure. We talked about roadmaps quite a bit. And how do we adjust our roadmaps? What kind of adjustments are being done, and are we doing massive process changes or kind of more near-term process changes? Interestingly, I think that you know, there's a sentiment that we're doing kind of a near-term change and expecting it to come back, and so we're really looking at you know, whether it's a 20%, 30%, or other drop in business, how do we really focus on the core right now, keep systems running, keep priorities, but also keep a view to the long-term roadmap that you talked about, and hopefully those things will come back.
So we had Ted in our group and Casey, and then Steve joined us a little bit later. And I guess the themes would be, the strong themes are massively stressful time, and let's just get through it. Let's all do our best to get through it as we have to in the short term. It was certainly a big theme, I think. And then a second theme that we talked about is, you know, how do we face the long-term challenge, financial challenge that our companies might have to embrace, and how are we going to strategize around that? And I think that there are strategies. There's some strategies we talked about what we can do as CTOs and as leaders to embrace that large financial downside, and how we going to transition our company. We talked about doing that in an open and honest way, open book management, open communication, and that even if we're faced with extreme challenge in the future as leaders, there are methodologies to traverse that path.
Yeah, so we shared current experiences. I think, again, kind of a mixed bag of where people are at, with some people actually looking for work and others having just let people go. I think that, you know, there was some discussion about grocery store shopping and tips and tricks on that, as far as you know, using Google to look at busy times, trying to get your Instacart orders in early. I thought that was helpful. But just talking about some of the more human problems as well, kids' education and being overwhelmed with resources.
So I want to say thanks first and foremost to Aaron. Really appreciate your high level of observations up front. Those were super valuable. I was trying to actually think about you know, other crises that we've had in the past. And, you know, by comparison, you know, obviously this one is very different because there's a human element to it. But for those who've been around long enough, and certainly this shows some of my age, you know, in the US, we have gone to war during periods of time in the past, say, 30 years. We've also had the dot-com crash in the early 2000s, and then subsequent financial market collapse in 2008. This feels very similar to those experiences, and I don't know if our younger workforce is kind of thinking about it in those terms, but that's kind of what I can observe in thinking about this, and Aaron's thoughts kind of pointed me in that direction, so I appreciate that feedback. Really, really important to recognize that all businesses are dealing with things different. Andre had a really good observation that his area was, you know, medical devices, but it's elective, so it's being impacted much like a lot of media businesses are, versus the other medical professions, which obviously are overwhelmed right now, just due to the demand that's required. So
this is a go. We're going to keep this group together, and we're going to keep meeting, and because this has a high value. So here's my parting words. Don't get too far ahead of yourself. You can't manage anything except what's going on right now. Before you make a decision, understand, make your goal clear, and ask yourself, is the next thing I do going to move me closer to my goal, or is it going to move me away from that goal? And let that be your criteria, because you're confronted with more demands on you than you're able to fulfill. And so maintain perspective. Probability is everything. There's no reason to go off the deep end if there's a 1,000,000,000 to 1 probability of something happening. So I look forward to meeting with the group again. You're all high potential, just, just gifts of God. Thank you.